We are here to discuss what the Hackney Borough Council can do to combat obesity, and first of all, we would like to start by introducing you to the London Borough of Hackney. Hackney is one of London's 32 boroughs situated in northeast London, and according to data from the 2011 census, Hackney is home to approximately 250,000 people. The local community is ethnically diverse, and the dominant age group spans from approximately 25 to 44 years old. Hackney faces an ongoing battle with obesity, in particular childhood obesity. According to the NHS, Hackney has the second highest prevalence of childhood obesity out of all the London boroughs, second to only Southwark. Hackney has approximately 2.3% more obese children reception compared to the rest of London, and a childhood obesity prevalence 3.7% larger than the rest of England. This may not sound so dire, however, when we look at the prevalence of obesity regarding children in Year 6, Hackney is 4.3% greater than the rest of London, and 7.6% greater than the rest of England. This means that more than 1 in 4 children living in Hackney is obese. We have researched and identified some of the key contributing factors relating to obesity, in particular childhood obesity. Activity environment is the accessibility, promotion, and public perception of physical activity, so sport, fitness activities, recreation, and such. Food environment is the same, but in relation to the accessibility, promotion, and perception of restaurants, supermarket, wholesalers, and so on. Food consumption is pretty self-explanatory. Consumer society refers to societal influences and the fact that we as a society seem to be consuming more and more for a variety of reasons. However, two key factors we found to play a significant role are ethnicity and parental influence. Children tend to be heavily dependent on their parents. Parents often act as role models and directly influence their children's eating habits and their attitudes towards physical activity. Research also suggests that certain ethnic groups are more prone to obesity than others. As we can see from this graph, not only are males more prone to obesity than females, but ethnicity really does appear to be a key contributing factor to obesity, especially at a young age. We can see that white, British, and Indian ethnic groups tend to have a lower prevalence of childhood obesity. However, Bangladeshi, Black African, and Black Caribbean children seem to be more likely to experience obesity. If we look at the ethnic diversity of Hackney, we can see that Hackney has significantly more people belonging to ethnic groups with higher propensities for being obese compared to London and England. This is very interesting and could be one of the reasons Hackney has such a high level of childhood obesity. Another interesting fact to consider is deprivation. Research shows that a strong link exists between deprivation and childhood obesity. As we can see from this chart, children from families with higher incomes seem to be less likely to be obese. The reason this link exists is not necessarily clear. Lower income may mean that families have less money to spend on healthier foods. However, it is also possible that it's something psychological, where parents perceive a healthy lifestyle to be too costly. If we then turn our attention towards Hackney, we can see that many areas of Hackney are subject to multiple deprivation. This map highlights the areas of Hackney in relation to how deprived they are. The darker the shade of blue, the greater the degree of deprivation. Greater levels of deprivation means greater levels of childhood obesity. But why should Hackney care about obesity? Not only does obesity increase the likelihood of many physical and psychological illnesses, but it also costs the taxpayer a lot of money. In 2007, the cost to the NHS of treating overweight and obese individuals was estimated at just over £4 billion. On top of this, the council faces ongoing budget cuts. On the 25th of February 2015, it was confirmed that Hackney's central government grant for the next financial year will be cut by a further £36 million, bringing the total grant reduction to £130 million, which is 35% reduction since 2010. The less we spend on caring for obese and overweight individuals, the more money will be available to invest in education, schools, and other frontline services. But how can Hackney combat the obesity epidemic? The key is early intervention. This chart was taken from the Government Office for Science, which carried out a lot of research into how the UK can combat the increasing severity of obesity. As we can see from the chart, the majority of critical opportunities to intervene in obesity are before 16 years old. Fighting obesity requires early intervention and targeting children.
Fewer than 1 in 10 people who are obese describe themselves as such according to the research. Paper in the Journal of BMJ Open says that being overweight and obese have become so common that perceptions have changed. Many obese people who are in danger of health problems associated with their weight, including heart attacks, stroke, cancer, and diabetes, think their weight is normal or only slightly overweight. It is a real worry that people underestimate the obesity because it means they are not aware of that they are at the increased risk of number of health problems, including cancer, and they don't react on it. So it is important to increase people's awareness of obesity, such as consequences, or how to use BMI calculator to estimate their obese category, etc. And the Borough of Hackney have different interventions for that purpose. The first possible intervention is early education. Hackney Council can hire teachers or subsidize schools to teach children about the danger of obesity and how to follow the healthy lifestyle. As Seb mentioned before, children take big proportion of obese people in Hackney, so this intervention can be very effective. And the research conducted in Michigan Ann Arbor on 526 fifth grade students showed that school education reduced calories consumed per day of participants by 7.2%. After getting a positive result, the research has been extended. When parents of the same participants did a similar educational program, the calorie consumption of children were reduced by nearly 11%. The explanation of such result is that parents are more concerned about their children's health and that they are more likely to be influenced by the educational programs rather than their children. To decrease the consumption of tobacco, the government or council used different anti-tobacco campaigns informing the harm of smoking. The same thing can be done to tackle obesity. However, measuring efficiency of this intervention is very difficult because it highly depends on the quality of campaigns. The researchers took a nationally representative sample of Americans and asked them to assess a variety of campaigns in an online survey. For them, the most important things were how informative, motivating, or credible the campaigns seemed.
Now let's take a look at the existing interventions in general to see their effectiveness, and also more focus on the policy-related interventions which are more relevant to us. Cost-effective, sustainable strategies are urgently required to curb the global obesity epidemic. To date, fiscal policies such as taxes and subsidies have been driven largely by imperatives to raise revenue or increase supply, rather than to change population behaviors. The most notable fiscal action in response to the rising obesity prevalence have been in the imposition of a fat tax in 2011 by Denmark and Hungary. However, the Danish fat tax, which taxed all the products containing more than 2.3% saturated fat at the rate of 2.79 US dollars per kilogram of saturated fat, was withdrawn 1 year after its introduction. The official explanation for the withdrawal of the tax was that it had resulted in undesirable losses of local sales and employment. However, there have been suggestions that its withdrawal was largely the result of food industry pressure on the government. At least 10% of fat tax revenues were swallowed up in administrative costs, and it was estimated to have cost 1,300 Danish jobs. Opinion polls showed that 80% of the Danes did not change their shopping habits at all as a result of the tax. The main effect on shopping habits was to push people over the border to Germany and Sweden, where the prices were lower. We believe that any community-led action will produce better outcomes than any other type of individual interventions based on evidence. For instance, of all the comprehensive strategies for reducing childhood obesity, those that have shown the most success included community element in partnership with school involvement. 3 community-school partnership studies have shown strong results in reducing childhood obesity than any other programs yet studied. Results from the first year of the Shape Up Somerville program show decrease in children's BMI. Participating children gained 1 pound less than the control group children. Shape Up Somerville is a community-wide childhood obesity reduction effort in Somerville, Massachusetts. The program's extensive community component involves many community organizations, the local media, city government, local restaurants and healthcare providers. The effort has led to changes in zoning laws to promote active transport, reduced portion size at local restaurants, and farmers market promotion. In 3 years between 2003 and 2006, the slightly less intensive Be Active Eat Well program in Australia also reduced weight gain and flattened the social gradient of obesity. The program took a community capacity building approach, working to build skills and relationship between community organizations, health organizations, schools, and other stakeholders. The program cost approximately $100,000 per year, $100,000 per year for each of the 3 years of intervention. A third community school partnership, Catch El Paso, showed the strongest results of any program yet. In addition to implementing Catch in El Paso schools, the Paso del Norte Health Foundation spent over $1.4 million to fund media campaign, the Walk El Paso Walking Encouragement Program, and Q Sabrosa Vida, a health eating program. Span-free results showed from the 5th year of Catch El Paso showed that El Paso's 4th graders dropped from 25.8% obese in 2000 to 18.18% obese in 2005, a 7 percentage point decrease in obesity prevalence. To conclude, we see that none of the only government or local authority actions led to impressive results. However, in all the previous successful attempts to tackle this problem, we can see that the key is to act together as a whole community rather than individual institutional efforts.
We've also looked at interventions by motivation and focused specifically on active travel. In the long term, active travel offers much potential for tackling obesity by incorporating physical activity into daily life. Right now in Hackney, more people who travel to work use a bike than use a car. Among all journeys made, 45% are active travel, of which 39% is walking and 6% is cycling. The Hackney Council has taken significant measures to achieve this outcome. The increase from 2001 to 2011 is exceptional, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people who are obese or at risk of obesity are also traveling actively. So who actually are the people responsible for Hackney's success? Does the active travel policy actually help tackle obesity? Let's look at who cycles, young or old. This chart shows that the group most affected by obesity in Hackney are aged between 25 to 64. The highest number of incidences are seen in the 50 to 64 age group. Let's go back to the question who cycles, man or woman. In Hackney, obesity is more common among women than among men. Among men, the prevalence is 106 per 1,000, while among women, it is 163 per 1,000. However, the percentage of female workers cycling to work is much lower than that of men. Furthermore, in Hackney, 37% of all cyclists are women. Even though this is the highest of any London borough, it is yet to be improved. How about children? We see from the table that 65% of children walk to school, 9% are driven by car, and only 2.31% cycle. 65% of walking is quite a high percentage of active travel, but we still need to understand why the cycling level is so low. The most likely reason is that children, but more importantly their parents, find the roads unsafe. A DFT study found that 60% of potential cyclists in England said it was too dangerous to cycle on the roads. Who is doing better than Hackney? In the Netherlands, 49% of primary school children go to school by bike, and more than 90% of children aged over 12 do so all year round. What are the Dutch doing differently? In the Netherlands, cycling has been a part of the culture since old times. In 1973, a group consisting of mostly parents pointed out the number of deaths caused to cycling children and forced the government to build cycling paths and increase road safety. And it worked. So the public initiated the process, which shows how important it is to create a cycling culture. Hackney will benefit more from active travel if the council manages to make people, and especially children, love cycling.